Hello, friends, and welcome to 3ABN Worship Hour. So glad that you have joined us. We are going to be jumping into the Word of God, the prophetic Word of God. We're going to be studying prophetic parallels. We're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 11 and Revelation chapter 13. In a sense, this is a summary of the 4 meetings that we've had previous to this in Daniel chapter 11. And I'm hoping we can finish everything in this 5th and final meeting. Before we get started, let's ask the Holy Spirit to be here with us. Father in heaven, just want to thank you for each one of our viewers. Want to thank you for the promise of the Holy Spirit to guide our minds and our hearts. Want to ask for that blessing to be poured out upon us right now. Father, wherever we are, wherever we're doing, please stop us and open our hearts and our ears to the important message that you've given us to prepare for the last days, for the end of time and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Thank you for Daniel 11. Thank you for Revelation chapter 13. Even though these prophecies can be overwhelming at times, we thank you that you have given us these insights that can help us to do what is important in preparation for your second coming. So help us to do that right now, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. So we are looking at prophetic parallels. That is the parallels between Daniel 11 verses 40 through 12:3. Right? That's going past 45 all the way to 12 verse 3, Daniel 12 verse 3. And then we're looking at Revelation chapter 13 verses 1 through 18. And we're going to be looking at how these chapters come together and parallel each other. That both of them overlap. They're both talking about the same end-time events. Of course, many of us are familiar with Revelation chapter 13, the mark of the beast and 666, and the things that are going to happen in the future. But Daniel 11 has eluded a lot of us. It's a very challenging chapter, especially the last few verses, and we have several different interpretations or approaches to these final verses. What we're looking for is evidence that they actually connect with Revelation chapter 13. We're going to be looking at this from 5 different perspectives. The first part of our study, we're just going to look at 14 parallels between these 2 chapters, Daniel 11, Revelation 13. Then the second part, we're going to cover these same parallels with some significant spirit of prophecy or Ellen G. White statements that kind of affirm what we found from the Bible. The third part, we're going to consider some insights from a man by the name of James White. That was the husband of Ellen White, and he wrote a few things about Daniel chapter 11. And then the fourth part, we're going to look at an amplified summary of the verses in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45. And then the fifth part, we're going to look at an amplified summary of the verses in Revelation chapter 13. So let's just jump right in. I just want to start by saying that there has been a new interest awakened among many today in the prophecies contained in this latter half of Daniel 11. And we know the Holy Spirit is at work, but we also know that Satan is at work because he doesn't want us to understand these prophecies. And theologians also consider this section of prophecy, Daniel 11, 45, especially to 40 to 45, to be one of the most difficult sections of Bible prophecy. So there's nothing solid on the table among theologians, even in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, of which I'm a member. And then there's controversy over this historically. All right, so we've got different views that have emerged in our history from James White and Uriah Smith that kind of contradicted each other or were opposite to each other. And we've got that history that we have to kind of deal with and walk through. But the most important reason for us to understand and have an interest in Bible prophecy is because it builds our faith in Jesus Christ. If we disconnect prophecy from Jesus, then what does prophecy profit us, right? Prophecies are going to come to an end, but we don't have that connection with Jesus Christ. They mean nothing to us. Jesus taught this when he, in John chapter 14 and verse 29, said, "And now I have told you before it comes to pass, so that when it comes to pass, you might believe." Right? So this verse is communicating 3 main points concerning Bible prophecy. Number 1, Jesus tells us about events before they happen. So sometimes we don't have an interest in Bible prophecy and we're just like, yeah, I've heard all that stuff and it's just crazy conspiracy theory. Who knows what it means? Well, Jesus wants us to know what it means. He's told us that He's going to tell us about events before they happen. I've told you before it comes to pass. What's the reason? Number 2, Jesus says that the events themselves will come to pass. The reason is, number 1, so that we will know these events before they actually happen. will be prepared for these events. You know, there were so many things that if we would have known ahead of time, we would have done something different or acted a different way or been more prepared for it, right? And it's the same with Bible prophecy. Jesus tells us about Bible prophecy because he wants us to be prepared for it. Not scared, but prepared. And then number 3, Jesus says that when he tells us about Bible prophecy, when he shows us the future and that event comes to pass, it will lead us to believe. Now, I don't know about you, but I need belief. I need faith. I need more belief. I need my belief in Jesus strengthened every single day. And Jesus says that one of the ways that we strengthen our belief is to understand Bible prophecy. Bible prophecy, when it comes to pass, actually causes us to believe more in Jesus Christ. This is the point of Bible prophecy. It reveals events before they happen so that when that event happens, when that history happens that confirms the prophecy, we can have a stronger faith or belief in Jesus Christ. And we see the same truth in John chapter 13, verse 19. Jesus here says, "And now I tell you before it come, that when it has come to pass, you might believe that I am He." Now, I like this verse a little bit more. This verse, in its context, is actually talking about the treason of Judas, one of the disciples, that he would betray Jesus Christ to the religious leaders. The son of perdition is being pointed out here in John chapter 13 and verse 19. And Jesus says, I'm telling you this before it comes to pass. I'm telling you about this apostasy among us, among the disciples, this apostate disciple, this professed Christian, professed follower of me who is actually going to betray me to the religious leaders. I'm telling you about this ahead of time so that when it happens, you will not be discouraged, that you will know that I knew, and that your faith in me, that your belief in me will be strengthened, that you will believe that I am He. Now, this is a vital part of Bible prophecy because in Daniel chapter 11 and in Revelation chapter 13, Jesus is doing exactly what He did in John 13 and verse 19. He's telling us about an apostate religious system or apostate religious systems working together to control the world and enforce what they think is the worship of God. Now, we're told about this in many verses in the Bible. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 talks about this falling away and apostasy of the Christian church that will lead them to exalt themselves and put their laws, their worship in the place of God's law and God's worship. And sometimes we think, oh, the Antichrist, that's going to be a terrible, dark, sinister person. No, the Antichrist is someone who places himself in the place of Christ, who may look like Christ and act like Christ. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 through 5 says the Antichrist preaches another Jesus, has another spirit, and preaches another gospel. So they're still preaching a gospel. They're still talking about Jesus, and they still have the emphasis on the Spirit. They are coming as ministers of righteousness, Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 13. And Satan himself comes as an angel of light. And so we need to recognize that the Antichrist, that word does not necessarily mean against or opposite. It also means in the place of. And 2 Corinthians chapter 11, 2 through 4 and 13 to 15 is telling us that the Antichrist system that's identified in 2 Thessalonians and in Revelation 13 and in Daniel chapter 11, this system is a system that's going to profess to be following God and worshiping God, but it's going to change the worship that is contained in the everlasting covenant, in the new covenant. It's going to change God's law and put in the place of God's Sabbath its own man-made Sabbath. In the place of God's law, its own laws. In the place of God's mediation ministry, its own mediation and ministry. All right, so in spite now of the repeat visions of Daniel in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, we have controversy over Daniel chapter 11. And the best theologians of our day have struggled with this, right? And this has led to a variety of interpretations which really stray far from the idea of Rome being this fourth kingdom that is so clearly put forth in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. And so we especially want to understand verses 40 to 45 because these verses are directing us to the final events that take place before Michael stands up. Of course, we've covered all of this in our previous meeting. We looked at what these verses understand, and we've understood how they lead us up to the close of probation. We talked about that, but now we want to actually firm that up. We want to look at the text in Revelation 13, 1 through 10. We want to look at the text in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45, actually 12, verses 40 to 12, verse 3. And we want to look at the parallels between these two sections of prophetic scripture. We've touched on a few of them in our previous meeting. We want to look at them in more detail. So First of all, parallel number one, and by the way, there are 14 parallels that we're going to be looking at here. And I'm hoping that when you see these 14 parallels, you're going to walk away from this and you're going to say, whoa, that is clear evidence that these two chapters are talking about the same actual events. Parallel number one. Both of these sections are preceded by a prophetic picture of God's people being persecuted during the Dark Ages, right? So when you get to Daniel chapter 11, verse 40, the previous verses, 39, 38, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30, those verses are all depicting the Dark Ages persecution of God's people, right? They're all talking about that dark age of tribulation that was identified in Matthew chapter 24, the tribulation such as never was or never will be again, when they estimate 50 to 100 million faithful people to God were persecuted and killed during those Dark Ages times. So Revelation chapter 13 is preceded by the same thing. In Revelation 12, you have the woman fleeing into the wilderness for that 1260-year period, and that fleeing in the wilderness was the time when the church was heavily persecuted. Same period of time, the Dark Ages. In fact, in Revelation chapter 12, it talks about the earth helping the woman, that is God's church, the earth being the wilderness. In Daniel chapter 11, verse 35, it talks about that God's people will be hoping with a little help. So the same phrase is used in both of these chapters to identify the help that would be given to God's people, the church, during the Dark Ages. So that's parallel number one. Both of these chapters, chapter 40, verses 40 to 45, and Revelation chapter 13, both of them are preceded by a picture of the Dark Ages. Then you've got the second parallel. The second parallel is that both of these prophecies focus on the fourth and last power in a succession of kingdoms. When you look at Daniel chapter 11, you're looking at the same basic outline in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8. You've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the fourth power. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the fourth power. Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the fourth power. Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the fourth power. The reason why Babylon is left out of Daniel 8 and Daniel 11 is because it is no longer on the scene of action by the time you get to Daniel 8 in Daniel 11. And in Revelation, you have the same thing taking place. Revelation chapter 13, John is looking back in history and he sees these 10 horns with 10 crowns, and he sees a beast, which is an earthly kingdom, coming up out of the sea, the multitudes, nations, tongues, and people. And its body is like a leopard, that's Greece. And its feet are like a bear, that's Medo-Persia. And its mouth is like a lion, that's Babylon. And the dragon, that fourth kingdom, gives him his seat and power and authority. That's talking about pagan Rome. So you've got the basic outline in Revelation 13 that you have in Daniel chapter 11. In fact, Revelation 13 could be considered Daniel chapter 13. You know, Daniel only has 12 chapters, but if we could have a Daniel chapter 13 that could help us better understand the prophecies there in those last few verses of Daniel chapter 11, we would have a Daniel chapter 13. Well, Revelation 13 is a Daniel 13. And we talked about that, I think it was in meeting number 2, and touched on it in meeting number 1, but meeting number 2, we talked about Revelation 13 being like a Daniel 13. So the first identifying mark is the Dark Ages precedes both of these prophetic visions. The second identifying mark is both of these prophetic visions are talking about the fourth kingdom, Rome, in its papal stage. And then the third identifying mark, or parallel between the two, is both prophecies include the time of the end that began at the close of the 1260-year period, or 42-month reign of the papacy. That is the time of the end that ended in 1798. So when you look in Revelation 13:5, it talks about the time of the end and the beast getting a wound inflicted in Revelation 13, verse 3, and the wound being healed. And that beast reigned for Revelation 13:5, 42 months. And so we see that same prophetic period identified in Daniel chapter 11, verses 35 and 40. You see in 35 of Daniel 11 and 40 of Daniel 11, the time of the end being specified. It's specifically pointed out, and we know the time of the end began with the deadly wound of Revelation 13 and verse 3. So number 3, both prophecies include this time of the end phrase. Number 4, both prophecies predict economic and monetary control as a key element in their final fulfillment, right? In Revelation chapter 13, it says, no man can buy or sell unless he receives the mark of the beast in his forehead or in his hand. And in Daniel 11:43, it says that this power, this twofold power, is going to have control over the gold and the silver and the precious things of Egypt. So that's economic control in Daniel 11:43, and economic control in Revelation 13 in verse 17. So number 4, both prophecies predict economic or monetary control. Number 5, both prophecies describe a threat of death to those who oppose this worldwide power. And that's Revelation chapter 13, verse 15 for Revelation, and Daniel 11:44. And we can see this clearly when we look at the details of this prophecy. These parallels are unmistakable. So let's just go over the first 5 real quick one more time. Number 1, first parable, prophetic parallel. Both of these prophecies are preceded by the Dark Ages persecution of God's people. Number 2, both of them are identifying the fourth kingdom. Number 3, both prophecies include the time of the end. Number 4, both prophecies predict economic or monetary control as a key element. Number 5, both prophecies describe the threat of death to those who oppose this worldwide power. All right, number 6, we've still got 14 total, so we still got a few more to go here. Number 6, both prophecies indicate that some will escape refusing to comply with the end-time order of world dominion. Revelation 13, 8 through 10, of course, those verses describe those who are written in the book of Lamb's Book of Life. They will not receive the mark of the beast. They will not go along with the system. Daniel 11:41 and 12:1. Daniel 11:41 says, Edom, Moab, and Ammon will escape out of his hands. Daniel 12 verse 1 says that those who are written in the book will be delivered in that time of trouble such as never was. So number 7, both prophecies identify that those who are delivered from danger are written in the book. Now we looked at Revelation chapter 13, 8 through 10. Same thing there. Those verses indicate that those who don't comply are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Daniel chapter 11, 41 and 12:1 connected with Malachi chapter 3 verses 16 and 17 and 18 tell us the same thing. Those who are delivered in that time of trouble such as never was, those who are found written in the book. Malachi chapter 3 explains how we get our names written there. And then number 8, both prophecies are followed by a prophetic picture of God's people who are going to be rescued or redeemed eternally by Jesus when He returns. We see that in Revelation chapter 14 verses 1 through 5. You've got this group of people that are on Mount Zion with the Lamb. They follow the Lamb whithersoever He goes. They have the Father's name written in their foreheads. Daniel 12, 1 through 3, you've got this picture of those who are delivered, they're resurrected, and they're taken to heaven where they'll shine as stars forever and ever. So both prophecies are followed by a prophetic picture of God's people who are rescued or redeemed. Number 9, both prophecies predict the setting up of a false system of worship. Okay, so in Revelation, we find that in Revelation chapter 13, verses 4, verses 6, verses 8, verses 12, verses 15 to 17, worship, 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 worship the image and the beast. And then, of course, Revelation 14, 7 says worship God. And then Daniel 11, we find this point developed in verse 45. In verse 45, it says that these powers are going to set up their tabernacles between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. The tabernacles, they're going to plant the tabernacles of this false worship between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Now I mentioned this word tabernacle is used 150 times in the Old Testament as a direct reference to the meeting place of worship that was designated by God. It is the tabernacle that the powers of Revelation blaspheme, right, by setting up their counterfeit tabernacles in the place of God. And so He comes to His end, none shall help Him, when He plants His tabernacles, the tabernacles of His palace between the seas, peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues of this earth, and the glorious holy mountain, Mount Zion, God's heavenly kingdom, where we're to sit in heavenly places with Christ Jesus. Number 10, a deadly wound. Both of these prophecies touch on the deadly wound that is inflicted on this power at the time of the end. In Revelation chapter 13, 3, he receives a deadly wound. And in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40, the king of the north pushes at him, and that means to gore. And so we have that same prophetic delineation there. and number 12, or excuse me, number 11. Both of these prophecies connect the deadly wound to the ending of the 1260-year period of Dark Age persecution. So they all come to the time of the end. That deadly wound comes to the time of the end, or the ending of that 42-month period of persecution. And then number 12, both prophecies focus on the glorious land. In Daniel 11, verse 41, the glorious land is called the glorious land. In Revelation chapter 13, the glorious land is identified as this kingdom, this power that rises up out of the earth and has two lamb-like horns. The glorious land for God's New Testament people is America, the continent of America, the land of liberty, civil liberty and religious liberty and freedom. This is a land flowing with milk and honey, just like the Jerusalem land was for God's literal Israel. This is the same for God's spiritual Israel today. And of course, this end-time power wants to undermine those principles of liberty, and we see it happening right now. We could touch on this so much more. Both prophecies, number 13, both prophecies predict the return of this Roman power to worldwide dominion. We see that in Revelation chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. He receives the wound is healed, all the world wonders after him. And we see it in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 43. He overcomes that pushing it at him by the king of the south. He comes against him like a whirlwind. He enters into the country, gets into the glorious land. Many countries are overthrown. Egypt follows him. The Libyans are at his feet. The Ethiopians are at his feet. He's basically having a worldwide resurgence of power and control. And then number 14, the final one, worship is the central issue in both of these prophecies. Worship is the central issue in both of these prophecies. So going through the 14 again, quickly, one more time, just in case you want to write these down, and you could always write into 3ABN, email us, and ask for the notes. I can send them to you. Number one, both of these sections, Daniel 11, Revelation 13, are preceded by the Dark Ages. Number two, the fourth kingdom is the focus of both of these prophetic sections. The fourth kingdom, the kingdom of Rome in its papal stage. Number three, both prophecies include the time of the end. Number four, both prophecies predict economic and monetary control as a key element. Number five, both prophecies describe a death threat for those who oppose these worldwide powers. Number six, both prophecies indicate that some will escape. That is, they will not comply with this end-time order of world dominion. Number seven, both prophecies identify those who are delivered from dangers being written in the book. Number 8, both prophecies are followed by a prophetic picture of God's people who are rescued or redeemed eternally with Jesus in heaven. Number 9, both prophecies predict the setting up of a false system of worship. Number 10, both prophecies point or identify a deadly wound. Number 11, both prophecies predict that the deadly wound would end the 1260-day period of dominion and Dark Age dominion. And number 12, both prophecies focus on the glorious land. Number 13, both prophecies predict the return of Rome to worldwide power. And number 14, in both prophecies, worship is the central issue that is in contention. In other words, these powers want you to worship them, worship according to their rules, according to their laws, in violation of worshiping God according to His law, according to the Ten Commandments, specifically the fourth commandment, the seventh-day Sabbath. So this parallel can be made in the context of our present age. We can see all of these parallels coming together to give us a picture of the fulfillment of prophecy in the time in which we live right now. For example, economic control. We are moving toward a time when no one's going to be able to buy or sell. We're moving to a time of digital currency. We're moving to a time when our finances are going to be taken out of the control of our hands. We're moving to a time very rapidly when if we want access, we're going to have to assent to the powers that be. And we could go on and on identifying all of the different characteristics that are taking place, that are being fulfilled in relation to all of this. So we want to now look at some significant statements from the writings of the Spirit of Prophecy, Ellen G. White, that will kind of firm up a lot of the thoughts here that we have looked at. First of all, I want to share a statement with you that I think is very important in relationship to what's taking place in these prophecies. It talks about this power in verse 41 of Daniel 11 entering into the glorious land, right? And we identified that as the United States, the present day land where God's people have found freedom, civil and religious liberty and freedom. In Great Controversy 573, and by the way, if you don't have the Book Crate Controversy, I'd implore you to get a copy of that book. You can get a free copy right here from 3ABN, or they're being spread out like the leaves of autumn all over this country and all over the world. It's a vital book because it outlines the prophetic movements that are taking place right now. It starts with the history of the fall of Jerusalem, the destruction of Jerusalem, which Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, and takes us all the way down through the falling away of the church, and then moves into the Reformation age, and Luther and Huss and Zwingli and all these different reformers, Calvin, and then takes us all the way through to the revival stages of the church, the Protestant church, and then its backsliding, and then the Millerite movement, the history of the United States and the Great Awakening that took place here, and takes us all the way through to the final events that are actually happening right now, with religious liberty being threatened, and encourages us to make the Scriptures our safeguard. Great Controversy 573, here's what it says. In the movements now happening or taking progress in the United States to secure for the institutions and usages of the church the support of the state, Protestants are following in the steps of papists. Nay, more, they are opening the door for the papacy to regain in Protestant America the supremacy which she lost in the old world. So it looks like Protestants doing this, but behind the scenes, they're bringing the papacy back into dominance right here. And that which gives a greater significance to the movement is the fact that the principal object contemplated is the enforcement of Sunday observance, a custom which originated with Rome and which she claims as a sign of her authority. The sign or mark of her authority, the mark of the earthly power, a beast is designated as an earthly power, the mark of the beast. And so we see here, it's not complicated. The mark of the earthly authority of papal Rome is Sunday. And Sunday has been attached to climate change. And Sunday is being attached to unions and work and a family day. There are very many good reasons for people to push Sunday. But the problem is that Sunday is part of the first four, that worship is part of the first four commandments, and no government can enforce any of those first four commandments on its citizens. Those first four commandments are off limits to governments. The last six, yes, we can enforce them. We can support the enforcement of them by law. That is not an infringement on religious liberty, but the first four commandments cannot be enforced. And of course, when you're putting Sunday in the place of the Sabbath, you're not just trying to enforce one of the first four commandments, you're trying to enforce a false worship on people. And Revelation says that's exactly what's going to happen. Great Controversy is affirming that. It says, going on here, that the spirit of conformity to worldly customs, the veneration of human traditions above the commandments of God, that is permeating the Protestant churches and leading them on to do the same work of Sunday exaltation which the papacy has done before them. Another statement, this one is from Review and Herald Extra, December 11, 1888. The Sunday movement is now making its way in darkness. The leaders are concealing the true issue, and many who unite in the movement do not themselves see whither the undercurrent is tending. They are working in blindness. They do not see that if a Protestant government, talking about the United States, a Protestant government, and another way you could say that is a Christian government, sacrifices the principles that have made them a free, independent nation, and through legislation brings into the Constitution principles that will propagate papal falsehood and papal delusion, they are plunging it into the Roman horror of the Dark Ages. We're going backwards. We're going backwards. What we need to recognize here is that this nation of America is a Protestant government primarily because of the freedoms that it gives to worship God or not worship God. It is a Protestant, and that's another word for Christian, because Protestants and Christians are the same, government or nation, because of the liberties, the lamb-like principles, the lamb-like horns, the liberties that we have. If you're an atheist, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Christian, if you're from a private sect, you are free to worship or not worship according to the dictates of your conscience. As soon as we violate those freedoms, we are no longer a Christian nation. We are no longer a Protestant Christian nation. Let me put it that way, because there's a difference between Protestantism and Catholicism, right? Even though both profess to be Christians, Protestantism has another level of Christianity to it, a level that dates back to the Protestant Reformation and to the protest of the princes, right? And that protest brought religious liberty, the principles of religious liberty, all the way to the shores of America through Roger Williams and the founding of Rhode Island. And those principles are what make us a Christian nation. There's a lot of counterfeit Christian nation talk out there. We want to be focusing on the true Christian nation talk, which gives freedom and liberty to all people whether they're believers or non-believers. Continuing on here, this is another statement, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, 771 and 773. There are many, even of those engaged in this movement for Sunday enforcement, who are blinded to the results which will follow this action. They do not see that they are striking directly against religious liberty. If you're pushing for Sunday laws, if you're pushing for Sunday legislation, you're actually fighting against religious liberty. You say, oh, we want everyone to be free to worship on Sunday. Well, what about people who don't want to worship on Sunday? There are many who have never understood the claims of the Bible Sabbath and the false foundation upon which the Sunday institution rests. Those who are making an effort to change the Constitution and secure a law enforcing Sunday observance little recognize what will be the result. A crisis is just upon us. And friends, a crisis is just upon us. You're listening to these words right now, and they are proposing that a crisis is right upon us. And in a very short time, we're going to see this overwhelming surge, push in this country and throughout the world for Sunday laws, which are a violation of the principles of this Christian nation. When Protestant, Signs of the Times, March 22nd, 1910, when the Protestant churches will unite with secular power to sustain a false religion for opposing which their ancestors endured the fiercest persecution, when the state shall use the power to enforce the decrees and sustain the institutions of the church, then will Protestant America, Christian America, have formed an image to the papacy, and there will be a national apostasy which will end in national ruin. That will be the end. Once we start enforcing laws that violate the conscience in relation to the first 4 commandments, not the last 6, the first 4 commandments, that leads to national ruin, and that's what we see pending. Continuing on with Review and Herald, October 22nd, 1895, I'm just sharing with you these statements. What we're looking at here is a statement or two that's going to confirm now the goal of Satan. Satan is seeking to set up his tabernacles, the tabernacles of his palace, his authority, his royalty, his worship between the seas, the peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues, and the glorious holy mountain, between heaven and earth. That's what we see in Revelation 13. That's what we see in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 45. Review and Herald, October 22nd, 1895. Here's what it says. Satan accomplished the fall of man, and since that time it has been his work to efface in man the image of God, to stamp upon human hearts his own image. Possessing supremacy in guilt, he claims supremacy for himself and exercises over his subjects the power of royalty. There it is, his palaces, the royalty. He cannot expel God from his throne, but through the system of idolatry, he plants his own throne between heaven and earth, between God and the human worshiper. He intercepts every way of light that comes from God to man and appropriates the worship that is due to God alone. Please write down this reference. Review and Herald, October 22nd, 1895, because it is using the language of Daniel 11, verse 45. And we're so confused about that. We think, oh, he's going to set up his palaces in Israel, right between those 2 seas right there in Israel, you know. No. This is talking about his worldwide plan to set up his false idolatrous worship between the people of this world and God's heavenly throne, God's heavenly kingdom. He's going to plant his own throne between heaven and earth. That's what the statement says. Let me read you another one. This is from Signs of the Times, June 13, 1895. Satan claims the world as his kingdom, not just the Middle East, but the world as his kingdom, and counts as his subjects those who unite with him in opposition to the God of heaven. Because they have chosen him as their leader, and how have they done that? By worshiping God on a wrong day, by setting up man's traditions for worship instead of following the law of God. Satan, is unable to dethrone Jehovah. He can't take him off his throne, but he exalts himself as the ruler of this world, and here it is, plants his throne. Remember it says in Daniel 11:45, he's going to plant the tabernacles of his palace, plants his throne between the soul who would worship toward heaven and the divine being Jehovah. See, he's intercepting himself. He's putting himself between the soul, the seas, peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues, the soul who would worship toward heaven, and Jehovah, the divine being Jehovah, who alone is worthy of worship and glory and honor and praise, to whom alone belongs all power and dominion and might. Satan arranges his plans in such a way to intercept the worship due to God and to transfer to himself the adoration due to God alone. I just think about that, because he is cunning, he is deceitful, and that Revelation chapter 12 tells us he is able to deceive the whole world. He deceived unfallen angels in heaven, right? A third part of the angels fell with him into deception. He deceived Adam and Eve before they were even susceptible to temptation. They were perfect, holy, sinless beings, and he deceived them. What makes you think that he can't deceive us, fallen human beings, 6,000 years down the road? What makes you think that he can't deceive us and cause us to think that while we're worshiping God, we're actually worshiping him? We need strict obedience. We need to follow very closely the Lamb of God wherever he goes. That's the instruction of Revelation chapter 14 and verse 4. One more statement. Review and Herald, April 14, 1896. Through generation after generation, from age to age, Satan has gathered human agencies through whom to work out his diabolical purposes and to bring about the enforcement of his plans and devices in the earth. The great putrid foundation of evil has been continually flowing through human society. Though unable to expel God from his throne, see the language again? Satan has charged God with satanic attributes and has claimed the attributes of God as his own. Through the serpentine sharpness, through his crooked practices, he has drawn to himself the homage that human beings should have given to God and has planted, here's that word again, his satanic throne between the human worshiper and the divine Father. Again, that's Review and Herald, April 14, 1896. So you notice Ellen White borrows the very language of Daniel 11, verse 45. He shall plant, or he planted the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. He uses that speaking of the purpose of Satan in setting up his idolatrous worship between the human worshiper and God, intercepting that worship that should come or go directly to God, intercepting it and bringing it to him by putting himself in the place of God, getting the worshiper to worship him instead of worshiping God. And of course, we see this in the final showdown between the seventh-day Sabbath and the mark of the beast. Now, I want to share with you some thoughts from James White, just a couple of thoughts. This man was a pillar. He was a pioneer. He was an energetic worker. He was a faithful husband to Ellen White. He was a humble man. Ellen White said he was the best man that trod shoe leather. He was willing to sit down and be quiet in order to preserve unity in our movement. And when a division came over Daniel chapter 11, the pioneers had been in unity and harmony with this up until about the 1880s. And then Uriah Smith deviated. He saw some things happening in current events with Turkey. And he said, you know what? I think Turkey is a better application of Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 through 45 especially. I don't think it's the papacy. The last prop's been knocked out from the papacy. And James White was beside himself. And so after Uriah Smith would get up and speak at camp meeting, James White get up right up behind him. And Uriah Smith was talking about the Eastern question, what was going on there with Turkey and how it was fulfilling prophecy. And James White would say, no, you got it all wrong. And Ellen White told her husband, sit down and be quiet no matter how right you think you are. No matter how right you might be, we don't want to cause division. And he did just that. He sat down. But he did make some statements that I think are very apropos for us today. Statements that were, I think, voiced in concern, but in a very calm and measured manner. Let's look at some of those statements. The first statement he makes actually is from the book Word of the Little Flock, pages 8 and 9. Now, this statement was made before the controversy. This was basically the first book that was ever published by James and Ellen White before they were even an organized church. These two Adventist pioneers wrote this book, and it was a word to the little flock scattered abroad. And James White talked about Daniel chapter 11 and verse 45. Believe it or not, one of the first things that was ever talked about in a first book ever printed. And this is what he said. Michael is to stand up at that time when the last power in chapter 11 comes to his end and none to help him. This power is the last that treads down God's true church. And as the true church is still trodden down and cast out by all Christendom, it follows that this last oppressive power has not come to his end and Michael has not stood up. This last power that treads down the saints is brought to view in Revelation 13, 11 through 18, and his number is 666. So James White did exactly what we've just done. He paralleled Daniel chapter 11 with Revelation chapter 13. In fact, he was, in a sense, my inspiration for making this investigation, this study, and discovering all of these parallels. Now, he didn't do the actual work. He just made the connection. We've done the actual work now, and it's helped us to see, perhaps as never before, the connection between these two powers. Much of this power, he goes on to say, its deception and wonders and miracles and oppression will doubtless be manifest during his last struggle under the 7 last plagues about the time of his coming to his end. Again, James White, Word of Little Flock, pages 8 and 9. You can get that book almost anywhere. You can download it. If you've got the Pioneer Library on the CD-ROM of Ellen White, you can get it from there also. All right, now let's get back into a couple of statements that were made by James White. These are all recorded by Leroy Froom in his book, Faith of Our Fathers, Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers. This one is taken from Volume 4, page 1067. Let us take a brief view. This is James White talking. Let us take a brief view of the line of prophecy 4-time span in the book of Daniel. Now, this might have been something James White said right after Uriah Smith spoke at a camp meeting. There's a couple statements here that would have been exactly or pretty close to what he would have said, standing up, to say something at the camp meeting to try to warn people, hey, wait a minute, we've already got this figured out. Why are we coming up with a new interpretation that's based on current events rather than the Bible itself? So consider that as we read the statement. It will be admitted that the same ground is passed over in chapters 2, 7, 8, and 11, with this exception that Babylon is left out of the chapter 8 and 11. We first pass down that great image of chapter 2 where we have Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome represented by the gold and the silver and the brass and the iron. All agree that these feet are not Turkish, but Roman. And we pass down the lion and the bear and the leopard and the beast with the 10 horns representing the same as the great image. Again, we all agree that it's not Turkey that is cast into the burning flame, but the Roman beast. So of chapter 8, all agree the little horn that stood up against the Prince of Princes is not Turkey, but Rome. In all these 3 lines thus far, Rome is the last form of government mentioned. So you can see him here really pressing the point forward in the wake of this transition to a different interpretation of Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45 to Turkey. You can see him pressing the point forward. No, Rome in chapter 2, Rome in chapter 7, Rome in chapter 8, it's going to be Rome in chapter 11. Now comes the point in argument upon which very much depends. Does the 11th chapter of the prophecy of Daniel cover the ground measured by chapters 2, 7, and 8? If so, then the last power mentioned in that chapter is Rome. And of course, that's what we've been looking at in the context of Revelation chapter 13. Rome, with the support of America, the image made to the beast. Continuing on, same basic reference, Leroy Froom, Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, Volume 4, page 1067. There is a line of history, prophecy in chapter 11 where the symbols are thrown off, beginning with the kings of Persia, reaching down past Greece to Rome, to the time when that power shall come to his end and none shall help him. If the feet and the 10 toes of the metallic image are Roman, if the beast with the 10 horns that's given to the burning flames of that great day or be the Roman beast, if the little horn which is stood up against the Prince of Princes be Rome, and if the same field and distances are covered by these 4 prophetic chains, then the last power of the 11th chapter, which is to come to his end and none shall help him, is Rome. But if this be Turkey, as some teach, and he's referring now to Uriah Smith and others in our denomination who taught this at the time, then the toes of the image of the 2nd chapter are Turkish. The beast with 10 horns of the 7th chapter represents Turkey, and it was Turkey that stood up against the Prince of Princes in the 8th chapter of Daniel. True, Turkey is bad enough off, but its waning power and its end is the subject of the prophecy of John and not of Daniel. And he's referring here to the book of Revelation, specifically Revelation chapter 9, which we believed and taught was the demise or the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the secession of the Ottoman Empire to Christian powers in 1840, August 11, 1840. Continuing on, but in the exposition of unfulfilled prophecy where the history is not written, the student should put forth his propositions should not put forth his propositions with too much positiveness, lest he find himself straying in the field of fancy. There are those who think more of the future than of the present truth. They see little light in the path in which they walk, but they think there is great light ahead of them. And so we do need to be careful. We need to be really careful about predictions we make concerning the future. But as you've followed through Daniel chapter 11 with me in the first presentation, the second presentation, a lot of that has already been fulfilled. There are some future events that we can't predict with 100% accuracy, but we can lay out the basic framework and see that framework confirmed confirmed by Revelation chapter 13 and the comparison of the two chapters together. And there's a lot of other chapters that we can look at here, but definitely we need to be looking at these concerns from James White. He continues on. Positions taken on the Eastern question are based upon prophecies which have not yet reached their fulfillment. Here we should tread lightly and take positions carefully, lest we be found removing the landmarks fully established in the Advent movement. It may be said that there is a general agreement upon this subject and that all eyes are turned toward the war now in progress, this is 1877, between Turkey and Russia as the fulfillment of that portion of prophecy which will give great confirmation of faith in the soon loud cry and the close of our message. But what will be the result of this positiveness in unfulfilled prophecy should things not come out as very confidently expected? This is an anxious question. And that anxious question actually came to fruition. It didn't come out as we predicted. And we experienced worldwide embarrassment as a church because we had taken up the predictions of Uriah Smith, and those predictions completely failed. And of course, in time, James White's warning and caution has established itself as right on target. So the history of this anxious question, which was so confidently expected, failed to happen as predicted, not only in the 1800s, but also much later in 1918 in World War I. This should give us a lot of pause as we reconsider the concerns of James White, and we need to reconsider them. If he was correct on this understanding that Rome is the final power in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, then today we should expect clear insight concerning Rome, especially in Daniel 11. Does this prophecy fit Rome in relationship to the recent and ongoing current events? This is what we've been considering. Now, I want us to do a summary of Daniel chapter 11, 40 to 45 in closing, and then we'll do a summary of Revelation chapter 13. So we've looked at the parallels, number one. Then we've looked at some key statements from the Spirit of Prophecy, Ellen White, number two. Now we've looked at some key statements from James White, number three. Now we're going to look at a summary amplification of Daniel 11, 40 to 45. I'm going to put in there all the things, all the truths, the insights that we've been gathering from these different Bible verses, right? And then we're going to do the same thing with Revelation chapter 13. We're going to amplify a summary of Revelation chapter 13. And as we see them, both of those amplified summaries coming together, hopefully we have a clearer picture of events that have transpired, that are transpiring, and that are just around the corner, just about to transpire before us. Here it goes. Daniel 11, beginning with verse 40. At the time of the end, 1798, shall the king of the south, atheism, France, push at, gore, or war against him, papal Rome, and the king of the north, papal Rome, John Paul II, shall come against him, atheism, communism, like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, U.S. military might, and with many ships, U.S. economic pressure. And he, papal Rome, shall enter into the countries, the atheist control countries, and shall overflow and pass over. Verse 41, he, papal Rome, shall enter also into the glorious land, America, destroying church-state separation, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon, those of other faiths or belief systems who obey the everlasting gospel once the gospel is preached. Verse 42, he, the papacy, supported by Protestant America, shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, the nations of the world, and the land of Egypt. Other atheistic secular strongholds shall not escape. Verse 43, but he, papacy, supported by Protestant America, shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt, that is worldwide economic control, and the Libyans, representing the Middle Eastern countries, and the Ethiopians, representing the African nations, shall be at his steps or shall be compelled to follow him. And then verse 44, but tidings, everlasting gospel of Revelation 14, 6 through 12. Out of the east, the message of the seal of God, the Sabbath truth of Revelation 7. And out of the north, the message of the King of the North, Jesus, and his second advent, that is the Seventh-day Adventist message, shall trouble him. And he shall therefore go forth with great fury, death decree to utterly destroy and make away many. So this is death decree persecution, Daniel 11 verse 44, in the context of the everlasting gospel being preached, the three angels' message being preached. Verse 45, and he, that is this king of the north power, the United States and the papacy working together, shall establish the tabernacles of his palace, his idolatrous system of worship and kingship between the seas, nations, peoples, multitudes, and tongues, and the glorious holy mountain, that is heaven, the New Jerusalem, the church of the firstborn. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Why? Daniel 12, verse 1. At that time, Michael shall stand up. Probation shall close, mediation shall cease. That great prince which stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. The 7 last plagues are going to be poured out, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered. None of God's people will lose their lives during that time. God's people will be delivered. Everyone who is found written in the book, that is, written in the Lamb's book of life. That's a summary of Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45. Now let's look at a summary of Revelation chapter 13 with these previous verses in mind. Think about what we've just read. Now let's look at a summary of Revelation chapter 13, 1 through 8, and allowing that prophetic picture to fill out more fully as we put into there the things that we've learned as we study the Bible. John says, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast, that is a power, earthly power, a kingdom, rising up out of the sea, among peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues, populated area of the earth, having 7 heads, previous kingdoms, and 10 horns, earthly powers, and upon his horns 10 crowns, that's kingly monarchs, or worldly leaders that are monarchs, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy, that is claiming the power and authority of God on earth and the power and authority to forgive sins. Verse 2 of Revelation 13. And the beast, this earthly kingdom or power, which I saw was like unto a leopard. That's the Greek culture that it has adapted and come from. And his feet were as the feet of the bear. That's honing back to Medo-Persian culture. And his mouth was as the mouth of a lion. That's the Babylonian culture. And the dragon, that's the pagan Roman power or culture. And Satan behind that gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Verse 3. And I saw one of his heads, that is the papal power during the Dark Ages, as it were wounded to death. Pope taken prisoner by atheistic France in 1798, and his deadly wound was healed. That is Napoleon, 1929, the Gorbachev Accord, the 1929 Accord, Gorbachev bowing to Roman legions, granting religious freedom. All of these events down through history, starting with Napoleon, all of these events have been the process of the healing of the wound. There's no one thing that has healed that wound, and that wound is not completely healed yet. It will not be completely healed until we have the papacy reinstated with the power to enforce civil penalties against those who refuse to comply with its religious teachings. And all the world wondered after the beast. The largest funeral attendance for John Paul was in the history of the world. There were 70 presidents there and prime ministers, 4 kings, 5 queens, 4 million people gathered in Rome. There were 3 U.S. presidents there. All the world wondered after this earthly power. And they worshipped, that is Sunday observance, they worshipped the dragon, that is Satan, which gave power unto the beast, the papal power. And they worshipped, Sunday observance, the beast, the papal power. And they said, who is like unto this earthly kingdom, this power, this religious power, and who is able to make war with him? No one can make war. It's a power of peace. It's a power, religious power. Who would want to speak out against or make war with this religious power that represents to the world a man of peace, right? And then verse 5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things, claiming to be God on earth, and blasphemies, claiming the power to forgive sins. And power was given him to continue 42 months. That's 538 AD to 1798 AD, the period of papal supremacy. And by the way, we're reading these verses in order, but the history of these verses, the prophetic history of these verses is not written out in order. And we need to remember that as we go through this, because sometimes people get tripped up and they think, oh, this 42 months is still future. No, this is a summary of the history, the Dark Ages history here in verse 5. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, claiming to be God on earth, to blaspheme his name, calling himself God. That is the Pope calling himself God's vicar, and his tabernacle, claiming to be the church of God, and them that dwell in heaven, taking the work of Christ as mediator. That was verse 6 of Revelation 13. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus in the gospel, to overcome them, to persecute and kill them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. That's geopolitical New World Order power that is coming. It was in the past, and it's going to be revived. Remember, he had that power before, then a head was wounded, the wound is going to be healed, he's going to have that power once more. And then verse 8, and all that dwell on the earth shall worship him, that is, observe Sunday, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, those who fear God and give glory to him. If any man has an ear, spiritual understanding, let him hear, verse 8. Now verse 9. He that leads into verse 9, now verse 10. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with a sword must be killed with a sword. The deadly wound of 1798 when the Pope was taken captive. In other words, what he was doing eventually happened to him. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Now quickly closing up here, verse 11. And I beheld another beast that is an earthly kingdom of power coming up, that is rising to power in the time of the end out of the earth. That's a less inhabited part of the world, the American continent. And he had two horns, strength and power, like a lamb, republicanism and Protestantism, Christ-like powers, like a lamb, and he spake, that civil enactments, as a dragon. That will be Satan uniting church and state and bringing religious persecution upon those who keep God's commandments. And he, the U.S. government, exercises all the power, uniting of church and state, of the first beast, papal Rome before him. He caused or enforced laws on the earth that them on the earth that dwell on the earth should worship, that is Sunday laws, the first beast, papal Rome, whose deadly wound was healed. And that is taking away religious and civil control and reestablishing, his wound was healed, reestablishing that connection between civil and religious control. And then verse 13, he, the false prophet, does great wonders, miracles, so that he makes fire, false Holy Spirit come down out of heaven in the earth in the sight of men. In verse 14, he deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, the papal Rome, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, unite church and state, to the beast, papal Rome, which had the wound by the sword and did live. Verse 15, he had power, military strength, to give life to the image of the beast, uniting church and state. And the image of the beast, papal Rome, that the image of the beast should both speak, legislate Sunday laws, and execute Sunday laws, that as many as would not worship, observe Sunday, the image of the beast should be killed. Verse 16, and he causes all, small, great, rich, poor, free and bond, to receive a mark, Sabbath change to Sunday, in their right hand, refrain from work with the hands on Sunday, or in their foreheads, acknowledge in the mind Sunday sacredness, that no man, verse 17, might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast, that Sunday observance, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom, let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, man's system, man's laws, and his number is 666. This is the number in the Pape's regalia or mitre, not the tiara, and that would be the close of Revelation chapter 13, verse 18. So, in closing, understand these prophecies are in the process of being fulfilled, and we are on the very edge of these last verses having their complete fulfillment. Now, this may be news to some of you, it may be shocking news, but go back and study this. Ask for the notes from 3ABN and pray and study about this so that you can be prepared for the second coming of Jesus Christ. God bless.